Listen, the moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment everything changes. Not because she suddenly respects you, not because she finally gets it, but because something shifts in her brain that you can't undo. And what I'm about to tell you will sound insane, but stick with me because by the end of this video, you'll understand why the guys who explain the least get the most respect. Most men think that if they just explain themselves better, if they just make her understand their intentions, their feelings, their reasons, she'll finally see their value. They're wrong. And there's a psychological reason why every word you use to defend yourself is actually lowering your value in her eyes. It's backed by research, and it's happening whether you realize it or not. I'm going to show you exactly why every explanation you give is pushing her further away. The neuroscience behind what happens in her brain the second you stop. And the one thing most men do that completely destroys any chance of her respecting them. But here's what's crazy. The guy who masters this doesn't just get her attention. He becomes unforgettable to every woman he meets. And I'll prove it to you. Because when you understand this, you stop being the guy who needs validation and you become the man she can't quite figure out. This isn't about being mysterious for the sake of it. This is about a psychological principle so powerful that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly why your explanations are killing attraction. The invisible switch that flips in her mind when you stop and why she'll start chasing answers from you instead of the other way around. So, let's start with something most men don't want to hear. Something that sounds wrong but is scientifically proven. Why explaining yourself triggers a response in her brain that makes you completely invisible as a romantic option. And if you think it's helping your case, you're about to discover the dark truth about what it's actually doing to her perception of you. The painful truth. The psychological trap that's destroying your attraction. Picture this. You text her why you were busy yesterday. You explain why you made that joke. You clarify what you meant when you said that thing last week. You defend your choices, your schedule, your friends, your life. And every time you hit send, you feel like you're building trust and clearing up misunderstandings. But here's what's actually happening in her mind. And this is where it gets disturbing. Every explanation confirms one thing. You care way too much about what she thinks. And the moment a woman senses you need her approval, something happens in her brain that's almost automatic. A switch flips. And once it flips, there's almost no going back. Here's the brutal truth. When you over-explain, you're not communicating. You're seeking permission. You're not being honest. You're being defensive. And you're not showing confidence. You're revealing insecurity. But why does this kill attraction so fast? Because confident men don't explain themselves to people who haven't earned that level of access. They just live. They make decisions. They move forward, and they let their actions speak. But when you constantly justify your behaviour, you're putting her in a position of authority over your life. You're making her the judge of whether your choices are acceptable. And no woman wants to be your mother. She wants to be attracted to you. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and this might sound controversial, but hear me out. There's a reason why the guys who explain the least often have the most options. And it's not because they're better looking or wealthier. It's because they understand something about human psychology that most men never learn. Here's what happens neurologically. Every time you explain yourself, her brain registers it as validation-seeking behavior. And validation-seeking behavior triggers the same response in her mind. Low status. She might not consciously think it, but subconsciously, she's categorizing you. And that category isn't potential partner. It's someone who needs my approval. And here's the kicker. Once you're in that category, almost nothing you do will change her mind. No amount of explaining will fix it, because Explaining is what put you there in the first place. Human beings are wired to respect boundaries. When you explain too much, you're showing you have none. You're giving her unlimited access to your decision-making process, and that removes all mystery, all challenge, all tension. But wait, there's something even more twisted happening here that most men never realize. Every time you justify yourself, you're training her to question you more. You're creating a pattern where she knows if she pushes, you'll fold. If she doubts, you'll defend. If she withdraws, you'll chase with explanations. You're literally programming her to disrespect you. Which means if you want her to see you differently, you don't explain more, you explain less. Because here's the paradox that sounds impossible, but works every time. The moment you stop justifying yourself, she starts wondering why. And that curiosity, that's the beginning of something powerful. But most men can't do this. And I'm about to show you why. So, if explaining yourself pushes her away, what actually makes her respect you? And more importantly, what's the one sentence you should never say to her, no matter what? That's where the real transformation begins. The shift. What happens when you stop and why it feels impossible. Before we go deeper, just do one thing for me. Hit the like button because what I'm about to reveal next contradicts everything you've been taught about communication. And if this is already making you uncomfortable, good. That means you're ready for the truth. Let's keep going. Here's the first shift, and it's the hardest one to make. Stop defending your decisions, not in an aggressive way, not by ignoring her questions entirely, just by owning your choices without needing her stamp of approval. But here's what nobody tells you about this. It feels wrong at first. Every instinct will scream at you to explain, to clarify, to make sure she doesn't think the wrong thing. And that feeling, that's your ego fighting for survival. When she asks where you were, you don't owe her a timeline. I was out is a complete sentence. When she questions your choice, you don't need to write a paragraph defending it. It worked for me is enough. Now, I know what you're thinking. Won't she think I'm hiding something? Won't she get upset? Won't she lose interest if I don't engage? And the answer might shock you. She might. But here's the twist. Most men never understand. If she loses interest because you stopped explaining yourself, she was never really interested in you. She was interested in the control she had over you. This isn't about being cold. It's about being grounded. Men who are secure in themselves don't feel the need to justify every move. They simply exist in their truth. Why does this work? Because it creates a boundary. Your life becomes yours again, not something she has veto power over. And boundaries are attractive. They signal self-respect. They signal that you're not auditioning for her approval. But here's the catch that trips up 90% of men who try this. You can't fake it. If you're still obsessing over her opinion in your head, she'll feel it. This only works when you genuinely stop needing her validation. And that's the hard part, because stopping externally is easy. Stopping internally, that's where the real work is. This is where most men struggle. They stop explaining externally, but are still explaining internally, replaying conversations, wondering if they said the right thing, checking if she replied, analysing her tone. That's not freedom. That's just silent anxiety. So, how do you actually stop caring what she thinks? I'm about to show you a technique that sounds too simple to work, but it rewires your brain in days, not months. You need to redirect that energy, build something meaningful, focus on your goals, your growth, your purpose. When your mental space is occupied with things that actually matter, her opinion becomes just one voice among many, not the voice. Now we add in strategic silence, and this is where it gets powerful. When she tries to bait you into defending yourself, don't take the bait. Stay calm. Stay brief. Sometimes a simple "I hear you" or "noted" does more than 1,000-word explanation ever could. Why? Because silence forces her to sit with her own thoughts. She can't argue with nothing. She can't break down your defense because you didn't give her one. And in that space, something unexpected happens. Something that might sound manipulative, but it's just human nature. She starts questioning herself. Why isn't he explaining? Why doesn't he care what I think? Did I misread this situation? Is he talking to someone else? That's the shift. The power dynamic just flipped. She's now the one seeking clarity. She's the one wondering about you. And that's where attraction lives, in the space of uncertainty, curiosity, and respect. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this might be the most controversial thing I say in this entire video. There's one phrase that will completely destroy all the progress you've made. One sentence that men say thinking it shows strength, but it actually screams insecurity. And I see men make this mistake every single day. I'll tell you what it is in a moment. But first, you need to understand this. Add to that leading by example. Don't tell her why you're doing something. Just do it. Let your actions create the narrative. When your life speaks louder than your words, explanations become irrelevant. She'll see you living with intention, making moves, building momentum, and she'll either respect it and want to be part of it, or she won't. Either way, you win. Now, here's that phrase I mentioned, the one that destroys everything. Never say, "I don't have to explain myself to you." Why? Because the moment you say that, you're explaining yourself. You're defending your right not to defend yourself. You're breaking frame while trying to hold it. Instead, you just don't explain. No announcement, no declaration, just action. And here's the thing. When you pull this off, it's not just about her perception. It's about you reclaiming your self-respect. You stop being reactive. You stop people-pleasing. You stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's expectations. But there's a final piece to this puzzle. Something that happens in her mind that you need to understand. Because if you don't know this, you might give up too early. In the next video, I'm going to reveal the exact words to use when she tries to guilt you into explaining yourself. The responses that shut down her tests while making her respect you more. But you have to subscribe to see it, because this is the knowledge that separates the men who get respect from the men who get ignored.